Have you ever wondered why Fight Club resonates so deeply with men who do the gym or martial arts? Well, the film contains 5 hidden philosophies that I've spent 20 years working out, and I want to lay them out today. All of them are really applicable to men, so let's break the first rule of Fight Club. Don't hit me! Don't hit me! Hit like, don't hit me! At the end of the video, I'm going to clear up some utter bullshit about the film too, and drop some bad news right at the end. So strap in, space monkeys. It's time to
just let go.
So I remember watching this film at the cinema as a student, and I was utterly blown away by it. Someone I watched it with, however, just thought it was a bad action movie. But I was fairly deep in both Eastern and Western philosophy, martial arts, Buddhism, etc. at the time. And frankly, self-destruction too, actually. So I saw things that a lot of people didn't. It's actually taken me until now, though, again, 20 years of philosophy and psychology study to figure it out. This film utterly changed my life. So after university, having seen it and read the book, instead of going into corporate work, which I was offered, I shaved my head and became a space monkey in martial arts dojos and sought adventure in war zones. I think that was part of looking for meaning. It's taken me years of psychology and philosophy study to figure out what the film was really about. So what's at the core of it? The central problem that's identified by Fight Club was first spotted by every gym bro's favourite philosopher, Nietzsche. So on the surface, Fight Club would seem to be encouraging nihilism, the idea that God is dead, nothing really matters, and we all have spiritual daddy issues. This can lead to a world where we see ourselves simply as matter that means nothing. Philosophically, you can't get from an is to an or, and without religion, you basically look at the world and say, it's all just stuff. In terms of morality and values, this leaves us screwed, technical term. So you might as well just lift weights and inject steroids into your eyes to mission.
Self-improvement is masturbation and self-destruction.
So some see the film as embracing nihilism, but like Nietzsche himself, the film starts with nihilism but doesn't end there. So Nietzsche said we have to create our own values in this valueless world. Equally, the film starts with this position of nihilism. This is the starting point. It's not where the film goes, as we'll see later. If you're interested in this topic, I recommend John Vervaeke's 50-hour, yes, 50-hour series on the meaning crisis. So in Fight Club, the narrator, who has no name, is Nietzsche's last man, his decadent, feminized, weak last man. I imagine in the remake, he'll be played by Destiny. I think that's a better fit than Ed Norton. Tyler clearly embodies aristocratic will to power. Tyler looks like you want to look, and they actually did a study of gym goers, and Brad Pitt in this movie was like the top pick for who people wanted to look like. He fucks like you want to fuck. By the way, never slept with Helen Bonham Carter, but I did babysit a niece and nephew at a rich ski resort once. Lovely lady, by the way, just as an aside. And Nietzsche did encourage self-destruction, as in the film, as a way to become the higher version of oneself. So Tyler clearly represents this urge for dominance, will, and aggression. In modern Western society, violence is monopolized by the state, thus taking away a traditional aspect of masculinity. Rather than suggesting nihilism, the first half of the film Fight Club suggests as an alternative kind of vitalism, we could say, for want of a better word, the idea of finding one's power, one's strength through literally fighting. For me, this is reminiscent with people like Bronze Age Pervert, the book's more interesting than the name sounds, and on YouTube, The Ark, Russell Walter, Wisdom Warriors, great channels if you want to hear more about testosterone and vitalism, a sort of Nietzschean approach to feeling fully alive. For me, all these young YouTubers are kind of like the smart love children of Nietzsche and Tyler. There's also a touch of sort of demiurgic Gnosticism in Tyler when he says maybe God hates us. So it's not just nihilism, that's Gnosticism. It's just a touch of that at times. But I think that relates more to the Freudian stuff I'm going to come to later. All right, some of my right-wing bros are not going to like this, but the central philosophy of Fight Club is clearly anti-capitalism, certainly anti-consumerism. Specifically, the film highlights materialism and consumerism as alienating, meaning that in a capitalist society, things lack meaning and deep satisfaction. This is even more true today. It highlights what a lot of leftist philosophers have talked about in terms of this alienation, the impact of industrial modern consumer culture, while we hopelessly try and define and satisfy ourselves with possessions, an impossible task. Unlike the modern left, however, Fight Club also stresses the emasculating nature of consumerism, combining with the Nietzschean elements outlined. Hence this hyper-masculine Nietzschean response offered in the film. The film is also absolutely obsessed with chopping people's balls off, testicular cancer, men growing breasts. So it's clearly about masculinity, and the director of the film says as much. To me, there's almost a try too hard aspect to it. Like when you see influencers who are hyper masculine, super into being manly, you just know they're going to get caught with like an orange in their mouth on Grindr or something like that in the future. And if you like Brad Pitt in this film, you're totally not gay, doesn't count. It's like prison or being in the Navy, doesn't count, totally not gay. So while the film may celebrate the vitalism, it is engaging with testosterone-infused masculinity, it also shows the descent into, we could say, communism or fascism, the lack of individual in Project Mayhem in the second part of the film. So in the second part of the film, the individuals involved, once they've found their strength, are actually suppressed as individuals. And effectively, there's a warning for us not to fall into cults while faced with the nihilism of the modern world. We can think of the two central characters as two extremes of sort of being over and under civilized, being hypo and hyper masculine. And I'll come to this, but there's an integration at the end. I mean, the toxic masculine one, Tyler, who people seem to admire, actually lives literally in a toxic part of town. And, you know, he's cool, but that's the point. It's a silly teenage projection of what the masculine is. I'm not going to mention Andrew Tate. You know, fuck it. It's Andrew Tate. Like, Andrew Tate is the silly masculine projection of what people think masculinity is when they didn't actually have a dad. Rather than classical Marxism, however, we could say that Fight Club is more aligned with, say, Uncle Ted's take on the dangers of industrial modernity rather than Karl Marx's. You know, the centrality of soap is interesting here as the borderline between the civilized and the uncivilized. Ted Kaczynski said that industrialization and its consequences were a disaster for modern people, I'd say particularly for modern man, and his vision was something like a return to the Stone Age, which is literally Tyler's vision in the scene where he walks in on Ed Norton asleep. Lastly, Zizek, I'm fucking my Slovenian's not good, though. Great country. Zizek's analysis of the film is also worth a look. He's, I think, a more reasonable Marxist than some of the crazy leftists out there. Certainly colourful and interesting, and he looks at it in terms of masochism, like the guy's literally hitting himself, which is what we come to in a consumer world. We always want to self-harm. All right, next up, let's strap on our turtlenecks, break open the pretentious packet of French cigarettes, and embrace the absurdity of life. So one day you will die, and Fight Club is clearly an existential film. It embraces the comedic fuck wizardry of our existence in the face of death. Doesn't it, Raymond?
What did you want to do with your life before you started watching this video? What did you want to do with your life?
The film highlights the freedom to choose that we truly have. Fight Club is one big reminder of mortality. It's essentially a death meditation from a Zen point of view, and an urgent command to live authentically, as the existentialists would say. We're all human sacrifices, and, you know, Kierkegaard suggested we need to take a leap of faith, which is central to it. And he suggested we embrace the freedom we really have, which to me is the heart of the movie. Perhaps we could say the film represents sort of like a teenager's fantasy of total freedom. It's like, fuck you, Dad. It's got that quality to it. In the freedom we long for when we're feeling constrained, when we're over-socialized, as Ted would say. I'd also say some people take it way too seriously. It's definitely an absurd comedy. There is a Monty Python edge to the film in its absurdity. It's also clear that the writer of Fight Club, Chuck Palahniuk, what's his face, he explicitly says it's an existential book. In this interview with Joe Rogan, he quotes Heidegger.
What is the sound of one fist punching?
It's not racist, it's just an accent. Calm the fuck down. So the philosophy that most people I've seen analyse miss is Zen. Buddhism more generally, but Zen with a Taoist influence in particular. This is throughout Fight Club, occasionally explicitly, like in the haiku. The worker drones can leave, the queen cannot, she is their slave. Yeah, I've watched this film way too many times. Another explicit one is the sticking feathers up your ass doesn't make you a chicken. That's from Zen. Great fucking phrase. The key aspect of the film, though, is the importance of direct experience, like with the chemical burn. This is super Zen. And the element on self-destruction. So Nietzsche's point of view is destroy yourself, but we can also think of destroying the illusion of self, you know, obviously the no-name narrator, the illusion of self. This is super Buddhist. The whole film's clearly about letting go of attachments, in this case physical possessions, the nature of impermanence, everything is falling apart, paradox. I think of the film as what Zen guys would call a koan itself. It's like an unsolvable riddle that makes you think or makes you have a deeper level of insight. I think this film loves you so much it wants you to have its abortion. Buddhism's all about waking up, and the whole point of the film is it's kind of like he's asleep throughout, right? It's like he's not awake, he's not asleep. We can say the sleep of consumerism, but it's also the sleep of non-realization, non-enlightenment. Enlightenment actually used to be called awakening rather than enlightenment. It's also got this kind of Taoish, Wangji kind of letting go aspect. I apologize for my Chinese friends for my pronunciation. I don't have any Chinese friends, of course. 2 billion of you, none of you are my friends. All right, last up, postmodern psychoanalysis. Fucking hell, I'd like to apologize to all the gym bros who watch this channel for the long words. There will be dick jokes and your mum jokes coming up, don't worry. I think people analysing this film often miss that it's really a piece of postmodern art. You know, it's self-referential, it's paradoxical, it's away from meta-narratives like Marxism and Nietzsche and blah, blah, blah. It's not really trying to make full sense in that linear way. It's not propaganda trying to convince you something. It's a montage of different thoughtful ideas that don't necessarily all make sense as a coherent whole, but each of them can get you thinking. It's intentionally provocative, ambiguous. It leaves room for various interpretations, as does good art. This is the element of sort of post-modernity, really. It doesn't always make sense, and it doesn't fucking have to. Why psychoanalytical, or kind of Freud, we could say, is a major influence here? Because there's a split in the narrator, the split of the hyper and hyper-masculine, of under and over-civilized, the split between the id and the superego, we could say. So of course it's not going to make sense, because it's coming from the point of view of a split self. Look up Lacan if you want to go really fucking in depth with this. Of course, Jung, the shadow, it's all about the shadow, and the shadow we have, the repressed side that's aggressive or whatever. Again, daddy issues, Jordan Peterson. By the way, if you are going to punch yourself in the ear, just put a little subscribe button there and just gently, subscribe. There we go. So there's the 5, but what is it not? People are fucking hysterical saying it's a fascist film. If you take your like liberal blue-haired girlfriend to this film, she'll be like, it's glorifying violence, it's fascist. It's clearly not fucking doing that. That's simple. There's 2 parts. There's the growth of vitalism. It's not saying that's the full answer. And then the risk of going hypermasculine with the cults and the lack of individuality that develops through that, or the hyper-masculine taking over. At the end of the film is actually a beautiful integration, of course, where he shoots himself in the head, where he takes into himself both parts, and he holds Marla Singer's hand. It's the integration of masculine and feminine, the possibility of true intimacy at the other side of that. So I won't say too much more about that, other than if you know anyone who says, oh, it glorifies violence, they're a fucking retard. That's all we need to say. And usually it's because our culture swung so much to the feminine in this day and age that anything which even looks at masculinity, and there are so few stories for men, anything that even looks at that is often demonized. So if somebody's saying that Fight Club is just an awful film, other than bad taste, what could be going on is just pure misandry. They don't want any portrayals of masculinity or any stories for men. All right, Space Monkeys, there's my take on it. I bet you haven't been YouTubed like that since grade school. But I'm not quite done. You might not like the last thing I have to say here. So Fight Club was about consumerism, but I watched it before I had a mobile phone or email, let alone social media. Yes, I am old as fuck you. It's also back when the Western economy wasn't shot to fuck. You know, Homer Simpson's lifestyle now looks luxurious. It didn't then. Now we're even more isolated by working virtually, many of us. And as for having a shitty IKEA home to blow up, well, that's actually something we'd want. Corporate jobs you can't get unless you're being positively discriminated against. So here's my fucking hot take, Raymonds. Fight Club needs an update to account for the information consumerist age that we are participating in right now. We're even less in our bodies now. Sleep is totally endemic. Corporate space exploration, as predicted by the film, is literally a reality now. So the materialism that Fight Club pushes against isn't the central issue anymore. It's not so much about buying stuff now, but being lost in data, appearance, and performance. Yes, nihilism has blossomed in ways that Fincher and Nietzsche could have only dreamed of, with addictions and deaths of despair rising to record levels, but distraction is now the central opiate, not stuff. The last men of today vape, jack off, to virtual porn, and yeah, maybe even go to the gym to look like the corporate version of how men look. This is all decadence. Of course, strength is great, but bodybuilding can be decadent. We are the last men. We are less than the narrator in Fight Club. We even watch others engage in fight clubs vicariously, consume cocktails of shooter games and reels from Ukraine. In a hyper postmodern twist, teens now mew while dressing up as Tyler, and people are trying to look like an imaginary version of an imaginary friend in an old film. The algorithm has us supporting companies we hate by watching videos we don't need to squirt dopamine we don't have. The things we watch end up watching us. You're not your clever fucking comments, you're not your Tinder bio, and you're not your fucking gamer tag. We're not special. We're not beautiful, unique broflakes. We are the all singing, all dancing crap of the metaverse. So yeah, our great war is a meme war. Our great depression is our fake lives. And our imaginary Tylers have big smiles on their faces. So what to do? Well, you have to know, not fear, but know that someday you are going to die. So just let go.